Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. And this is a video that I wanted to cover for a while. I just had to get the gear properly. It's something that I've always been a proponent of and spoken about on either my Discord or the forums. And now it gives me a chance to kind of break down how you properly do it. So this is going to be, as the title says, it's going to be Buff Troll Guide. Now I'm not going to be touching really much on the Battle Troll side of it. Battle Troll and Buff Trolling are very similar, but Battle Trolling is more on your rotation. You know, you could take full DPS gear, DPS augment. So it's a similar spec to how Buff Troll is, but a Battle Troll is something that you only use, and I'll bring it up again later in the video, but I wanted just to cover at the beginning, at the start of it. Battle Trolling is something that you want to do only if you know the group, if it's their league mates, and you know what the power requirements are, you know what the raid requirements are. If you're doing like older content, but it's not something you're generally going to pug with. It's not generally something you're going to just queue up with. Battle trolling is something that is more of a byproduct. It's not it's the same thing as like battle healing, battle tanking. It all falls into the same thing. You have the ability to do some decent damage as battle troll just because of your buff troll base spec, but it's something that you need to focus on getting the foundation of a buff troll first before you can learn to battle troll. It's basically learning to walk before you can run. So let's kind of pop into this here. So we'll start the spec off clean. Now I will say, in terms of artifacts, this is the only, like, sorry, I forgot to change my neck. In terms of artifacts, this is the only part of the guide that's going to be a right and wrong answer. Unless you're using the Claw of Alkund, Amulet of Rao, and either Tetra or Cog. I don't have a Cog because I just put it into my Tetra because I normally don't run with Prec DPS, but obviously if you run with a Prec DPS heavy group, you'd run Cog or both, just depending on. But a Buff Troll setup is only these three artifacts. It's not like Grimbor's Change. It's not running like Tetra and Cog. It's not any other combination. If you're not running the Claw, Amulet, and Tetra or Cog, you are not a Buff Troll. So these are three artifacts you 100% require. It's been thoroughly tested on paper, in raids itself. You know, you're not trying to give up not only the, like you think, oh, Amulet's not really to buff damage at all. It is. The 5% defense debuff instead of the 10% regular 10%. Makes a large difference, especially when it covers multiple ads at the same time. It's been tested thoroughly, so these are three artifacts you 100% require if you're going to consider yourself a buff troll. But other than that, it all goes into your spec. So a buff troll spec is always going to be super powered because unless you want to spec like a weapon mastery build, I don't. But if you want to do like a flurry shot build and focus on prec and stuff like that, you have at that point you could be hybrid or weapons expert. But normally, if you're going to be a typical power troll, it's going to be super powered because you're not going to be using really any of your weapons to regen. So if you picked a hybrid spec like I normally would for a controller, your power regen is going to be minimal. So in terms of the critical power chance, you're always going to take these. Because even though you're not using, like your Claw Pot is going to be one massive tick rather than the instant, because you lose your instant regen using Claw. It'd still be manually these. This is where it kind of breaks off into the Battle Troll spec. If you're going to Battle Troll, then you'd have to take all your critical attack and critical attack chance innates. So an extra 60 skill points here. But since I'm not showing that, I'm not going to worry about it. And then 100% of your skill points into health. So that's where the buff troll build starts. You're maxing your health, because maxing your health is going to apply the largest buff possible to your Tetra and Cog to be able to provide provide a buffed might and or precision to the group. At that point, I mean, you can spec your other skill points, but I'd rather do what else I need here. Iconic powers, you're not going to require any super speed. You could take just the speed innates. Normally, since I have the extra skill points, I would still take these as well, just because you want to give some power back to yourself if you require it. You can take phase dodge if you want to have a shield like that. Weapon mastery, your weapon for buff trolling really doesn't matter. You could do the whole brawl, weapon mastery, brawl, shuriken storm if you wanted. I still do hand blaster, solar flame. But really, that's your choice. If you want to be doing more of a battle troll spec, you would probably be using Brawling Shuriken Storm or like dual flurry shots. You'd be using a proper weapon mastery combo. And then after this, you're putting everything else into VIT. So you're not putting anything into might and power. Once again, if you're using if you're doing like a battle troll spec, this is where you change it. The greater your VIT is the greater your claw crit. Claw crit. But you're still, even though you're buffing the group in terms of their damage, which I'll show later in a spreadsheet and it'll be in the description link, you can't sacrifice too much VIT because I'll show you in the augment spec. Really, it's you're sacrificing a lot of VIT in a buff troll spec, so you still have to maintain enough VIT to be able to properly power the group, because you can't have your healers and support roles struggling, or your DPS if they're like mental, light, atomic, stuff like that, the power heavy power sets. But I mean, once again, a battle troll spec, you'd be specking more might and power or precision, depending on whatever it is. That's how that spec differs. So in terms of augments, this is where it also differs. So in a pure buff troll spec, you're not taking any of VIT augments. The only reason you take VIT augments is because your group can't support the power. And I'll break down the differences in terms of how much the buff is once again in that spreadsheet. But the only reason why you're taking Vitinates is just if you need to increase your claw pots so that the group has more power. Which is something that it's not something I can tell you. It's all experience in your group. So that's why you got to play around and have different builds or different augments leveled up. So you'd have the 4 dominating ones, and then 2 your dominating and adaptive ones. So that in current content, you're going to have that extra 3% dom and health buff in the current content to buff it even further. Other than that, your weapon spec, it doesn't really matter. Replenishing adapter is going to be fine. Your head mod, once again, it's going to be whatever supercharge you're running. Nothing really changes there. Your neck mod is going to be escalating replenishing procs. Just because while you're not using recharge as often as you would, you're still using recharge to clip your debuffs or clip other power, so you still have that critical power chance increase, which is nice. If you are a battle spec, once again, the only difference here would be using escalating might or relentless precision. Back mod, whatever applies to your power set. Your chest mod is going to be hardy because of the 5% increase. Leg mod doesn't matter. Head mod's going to be max damage. If you're mental or gadgets, you can use improved stealth if you're using that. Foot mod, once again, tell me mastery doesn't really matter. And then in your Starface mod, you have the choice to run health. You could run like might and health, whatever you want. It's just the health. The Starface mods may change in the future, but at this point, obviously, you want to take health because it's a buff troll spec. Now, in terms of trinkets, we've got a couple of options. There are some trinkets that provide, like Heartthrob is the ideal ones, the Valentine's event one. Gets 5% health and also does some debuffs. The other 5% health ones are the anniversary ones if you have them. Whereabouts are they? Oh, right here. So the Tombot device, as you see, 5% health, 30 seconds. The 25th Century Communicator, 5% health. And then the partially simulated servo unit is 5% health. So these 3 items are all 5% health. And then the Heartthrob trinket. So ideally, Valentine's season is not that far away at the recording of this video, so you might have a chance to get this. And then the only other trinket that buffs health is the OMAC trinket. The OMAC trinket, actually I can pop it right here, it doesn't matter. The OMAC trinket gives 125% base health. So that's, I mean, it's an option. Once again, in the spreadsheet, you'll see how much this actually matters. So because if I show you a number like, oh, my base health's 230,000, you may seem that's a lot, but it's all depending on how it is going to relate to how much your might is buffed and how much might buff you provide to the group. But if you're looking to go kind of overkill over the edge, maximum health as possible, you will require the OMAC trinket and then a 5% health trinket after that. And yes, they only last for 30 seconds, but I mean the same thing, you can rotate it. So, like I said, we've got max health spec, everything else in the VIT. That leaves us, like I said before, about 229,000 health. We're sitting at 30,000 VIT, which is still completely manageable. And then obviously our dominance is way over the top because of the dom augments. So now we can kind of step into Legion content. Oh yeah, I don't have a teleporter here. So now we're in Central, or not Central City, we're in the 31st century. So this is now going to proc our augments. So now we're sitting at 244,340 health. The dom and everything else doesn't really matter. So in terms of outside buffs, we have a couple options here. Do I have here, this is all damage. Yeah, I might have to pop a bank one here. There it is. So, in relation to buffs, we have two options here. Actually, technically three that'll stack. So I might as well do all these. So we have the health soders. These are the health cookie ones, similar to the damage cookie ones. These are the ones you get from the seasonals. They provide 5% health. We get they stack with the 5% health from the compound and mega. And then we've got the all natural soda, which gives the 5,000 base health if you're using the long lived legion ones. So it all depends. Obviously, it's not really sustainable to use a health cookie every single time you want to buff troll. That's not realistic. Much more manageable to use the all natural soders. But if you want, once again, and you'll see in the spreadsheet, if you want to go like max hardcore, max health, then yes, you'd have to use the health cookie because both these stack. I mean, the cookie also lasts for 30 minutes, which is nice. So if you die a bunch of times in Elite or a bunch of wipes, then you're still having that. But I mean, all natural soders are so simple to spec. And then as the DLC episodes increase, that the base health that we get from these will increase as well. So say if I take like an all natural one, and then we take Omega. So now if I'm running a raid, I'm looking at 260,574 health as a base. So not only are you completely tanky as a troll, and you can pretty much survive a lot of one-shots, how the buff actually works, actually we'll go up here. So with these artifacts, we have the claw buff, which gives the 7% might, restoration and dominance to the entire group, or at least at 200 rank it does the entire group. If you're a lower rank, it only does, actually it doesn't even do the 7%. No, it does the 7%, sorry, it doesn't do the crits. So you still get the 7%, but it's only going to be 4 players. At 160, it's going to be 8 players, and at 200, you get the 5% critical chance and magnitude for the group as well. And then obviously the aim of the Frau, you know that works. That doesn't too much apply to the buff troll stats. And then we've got our Tetra here. So as you can see, our base might is 63,768, and they just killed those ads. So now we're going to park the buffs, and our might goes up to 81,096. So we'll kind of let that drop. It's going to last for 12 seconds. Obviously, you're going to be using more powers between that. So we went from 81 to 63. So that's a fairly large chunk of might that you're going to provide for the entire group. Now, the stats are obviously going to be different if you're Prec and using Cog, because the might and Prec will scale differently. But that's what you can expect to give your group. You know, that almost 17,000, a little bit over 17,000 might that you're giving to every single DPS in the group. You're giving 17,000 extra might. And that's very beneficial to running with the group, because really controllers, we're not doing anything for crowd control. There is no crowd control to speak of. Either it's going to be override by a tank, or they're just going to use a Chron Mac emitter, which will override it by a consumable. So really, trolls' jobs aren't really there to be even a battery, because most power sets are pretty much self-sufficient on their own. Yes, there's those power sets that require a troll, like mental, not even so much gadgets, like mental, atomic, fire tanks, rage tanks, stuff like that, where they need a little bit of power to maintain their rotations, or some kind of spammy healers. But even then, I wouldn't classify trollers as batteries. Now we're moving into the buff trolls. So let's jump into the spreadsheet, and I'll show you how and what this actually reflects in different builds, and how it reflects in terms of max might. Okay, so just to give a quick breakdown of what the actual specs were. So, for example, in each one of these tests, because I know people's skill points are going to differ, I put the maximum 285 skill points into each primary stat, so like health or primary stat being Vit, and then I put 250 into the secondary stat. So like myself, which has, 590 whatever skill points, I can do a lot more than 250 into the secondary one, but this test was just here just to cap it at that, so it made it a little bit more realistic. Each test I had the 200 Claw, Amulet, and Tetra. Each test was performed, like I said, in with the Legion Augments in Legion content. I had 4 times health mods and 4 times vit mods. And then the OMAC Trinket, like I said, gave 125% health, which is around 2k. So if I did a max vit spec, so my base vit's 35k, my health's 202,000, the claw tip are going to be about 2,500 to 2,600, and then I'm buffing my might by 14,000. So if I did a full spec with Dom Augments, same thing, my vit drops by about 4,000, my health goes up by roughly 20,000, my claw pot ticks drop by about 300 each, and then my buffed might only goes up by about 900, so it's really not that big of a deal. So if you say if your group is struggling for power, it's much more beneficial to do a max vit spec, because really it's about, yeah, technically about 1,000 might difference, but you're giving so much more power here overall. So it just depends on what your group requires. So now we jump to the full health spec. So our base vit once again drops because we still got vit augments, but we got full health. So now we're at 212,000, which is about 10,000 extra health. Our pot ticks, same thing, not too far off what they were, but dropped by about 200, and we got 14,554. So now we've got a better might buff than we did with the max vit spec, just by having the vit augments. So once again, a bit more realistic. We don't have as much health as we do with the Dom spec, but it turns into we're still getting better health and providing a better buff than it would be running a max vit spec, but this is more like a power troll set. Then we've got the full health spec with Dom Augments. So now our health jumps by about 30,000. Our base vit also tanks by about 6,000 almost, 5,000. So yeah, the claw ticks are about 400 less, but now we're giving, you know, almost 1,400 more might, which is much more noticeable in content. So now we go basically into the buffs. So we've got full health spec and Dog Augments with a Mega and Health Cookie. So like I said, that's a 10% health buff in terms of that lasting 30 minutes. So now our base health is 261,000. Our base fit still pretty low, 26 compared to what the 35 was going to be. So yes, our claw pot ticks are much lower here. So this is why I said you're going to have to know your group to know if they can survive on that type of power, because you don't want to starve your healer, you don't want to starve your tank, you don't want to starve your other DPS. But the trade-off, I'm giving 17,000 might to that group. So if your group can survive in terms of the spec, so the only difference here was like the Mega All Natural, the Hardy chest mod, Health Affinity, stuff like that. So this is much more realistic of a spec because you're not always going to use that health cookie. So the only difference was 400 might, so not that drastic. And then basically this was like your tryhard spec, Omega, All Natural, Hardy, Health Trinket, Health Affinities, OMAC Trinket. You're looking at 270,000 health, so very, very tanky as a troll, and you're giving it 17,860. So these specs, ideally this is what you want to have as a buff troll, but it all depends on your group and whether or not they can sustain that power. If they can't, yeah, you lose about 2,000 might, but it's much more realistic to be able to use these because you're still maintaining that power. So it's just one of the things where you're going to have to play around some builds with your league or pugs to see what they kind of manage. If you want to take a couple armories, you can do that. But this is the type of stats you're looking to give the group, which is very beneficial for content. I know every single DPS is certainly going to want an extra 17,000 might, and they don't have to do anything. So, take care, guys. Any kind of questions or comments about specs at all, leave that in the comment section, and we'll see you in the next video.